Hi, Kashif. How are
Hey,
you?
good, good.
Good.
I don't know how you do this, but your hair looks like absolutely flawless. I don't know how that happens.
It's a lot of flat ironing and
Yeah. And of course, it's the first thing I noticed because there's some jealousy that pops through. It's athletically challenged.
oh, that's so funny. Yeah, I just got like several inches chopped off too. So
Yeah.
like makes it even better because you chop
Oh,
off
that's
all
why it
those
looks.
like frayed ends.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I was wondering what looked different. So that's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to just go ahead and get started here because we
Sure.
already have participants who've joined us. So
Okay, awesome.
um, I know we have about an hour today, and let me just get out of this view for a second here. How do I exit full screen? Okay. So I'm so excited for everyone who's joining us today live for this webinar because I've been a little bit elusive as far as what this test is all about and where it even comes from, what is the test and how we're going to use it. And so today is the big reveal. So we have Kashif on with us today, who is the CEO of a company called the DNA Company. And so we're going to be interviewing him and talking about the DNA test that the DNA company offers and how that might be useful in your healing journey with BII specifically. And so when I came across this, I met Kashif through a mastermind event that I went to for healthcare practitioners, holistic healthcare practitioners. And when I saw his talk, I was like, all the wheels or the gears started turning in my brain. Like, oh my goodness, this test could be so helpful to so many of the women like me, or the women that I've worked with, or women who are struggling to regain their health post explant. And I'd never really considered genetic testing in the past because, you know, let's say 23andMe is the easiest example, right? You have your raw data, but then what? That really doesn't help anyone. So what? You have an MTHFR SNP. Now what do we do? It doesn't really give you anything actionable. And so I've kind of steered clear of that because I think you can get in a slippery slope trying to treat individual gene mutations. But this opens up a whole new world, what they've created over at the DNA company. So I'm so excited to introduce you to Kashif. And Kashif, could you just kind of share a little bit more about yourself and the company and how this all came about?
Sure. So first of all, awesome to be here. Good talking to you. And yeah, so myself, I don't actually come from the industry. I'm not a clinician. I'm not a scientist. We have an awesome team here that does all that. I literally had a personal issue myself. So I used to work on helping companies grow. I was a PR and marketing guy. We had a firm here in Toronto where I live, and from mom and pop shops all the way up to the biggest companies in Canada, we used to help them with their sort of campaigns, right?
Mhm.
I got really sick. So I'm 42 now. When I was around 35-ish, eczema, psoriasis. I had acid reflux, migraines. My business partner used to drive me home because I'd have nausea in the middle of the day, just couldn't figure out what was going on. And each one of these things were being treated as separate issues. Here's a cream for this, here's a pill for this, here's a test for this. And like, why is all this happening at the same time?
Mhm.
Right. And it kind of sounds like I had BII, but I didn't. I didn't have implants, so but the symptomology and why this is relevant is because it goes back to the system failing, right? So you
Mhm.
got this central hub of I'm now at the age where everything that I've been doing wrong in terms of environment, nutrition, lifestyle, and not wrong in general terms for me, for what my genetic code needs, I was doing things wrong. That central hub of like something's failing, all of a sudden the spokes of all these symptoms start poking out, right? And all these things come back to the same. Once I discovered my genetics and understood that there's an actual instruction manual that I can read that tells me how my body works, and instead of trial and error, trial and error, trial and error, one size fits all, precisely what my body needs to identify and fix, everything went away,
Mm.
right? Like everything. I'm not sick. In fact, I'm in the best health of my life, better than my 20s, and I'm 42, because now I know how my body ticks. And that's where it's interesting. A patient came to us. So we had a clinic here in Toronto that was set up for research. It wasn't sort of advertised. It was more like clinics that had rare problems that they couldn't fix. They would send to us and we would work collaboratively to help them. We had a patient who just autoimmune, no energy, brain fog, all the BII package, right, that you could think of. And we actually thought about, why is she having this sort of autoimmune inflammatory issue? She's actually an athlete that was very healthy. And we brought it back to the implants. We asked every question we could. She got explanted, by the way. And it solved most of our problems, including some other iteration of work that we did on top of that. And that study for us then put us into touch with other people where you learn what was actually going on, what she needed to fix, and how she got better. And completely unintentional, but we eventually got there.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so this really, one of the things that we connected on right away was breast implant illness and how this could be helpful, because you have seen patients who have had breast implants and been very sick and recovered their health utilizing some of these tools that are a part of the very personalized approach that you give each person, right? And so we connected on that fact that you had been, studying this and had, a lot of really valuable information on the genetic side of things, and, what sort of genes might be expressing that would lead to the onset or the expression of breast implant illness, and how do those differ between, someone who has implants and isn't sick versus someone who is, right? And I think that is some of the most valuable information, in addition to a lot of other things. But beyond that, so I want to get a little more specific. So I want to come back to breast implant illness, but for now, would you mind just sharing, why should we be doing genetic testing in the first place? Why should we care?
So I think what you said in the very beginning, genetics, quote unquote genetics, has been underwhelming. Like it hasn't really delivered much. On the science side, it's incredible, but what a consumer has access to, it sucked. Like literally, that's all I can say. It didn't give you got an 80% chance of Alzheimer's. What am I going to do with that? Other than you just gave me anxiety for the next 30 years. What do you do with that information? But are you telling me that with the same genetic profile that you're saying has an 80% chance of Alzheimer's, 20% didn't get it? So what are you actually telling me?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's where we started off to say that genetics has done a good job of understanding what each gene means, what each gene does. It hasn't done a good job of mirroring that in the way the body actually works, which the body isn't a bunch of independent 22,000 genes, which is what we actually are made up of. It's systems and processes and pathways. You have a cardiovascular system, a hormonal system. If you try and look at each gene independent of each other, you're only ever going to end up with 80% chance of this, 20% chance of this, because there's other things going on. So going back to your example of the MTHFR, which is a sort of most talked about methylation gene. Methylation is your main anti-inflammatory process. So if you only look at that one gene, you're going to understand whether it's doing sort of good, medium, bad work. What if you're identifying it as doing bad work, that one gene? But upstream in the system, there's 5-6 genes this way, 5-6 genes this way. It's like you're looking at instead of the whole orchestra, one instrument, and trying to figure out this song, right? You're just listening to the drums. That's it. And you're making your call. What about the guitar and the everything? Like you haven't heard the song, right? So that's where we first took the genes that were already studied. Here's what this gene does. And then we said, how does the body actually work? And we did that first. Then we reverse engineered what gene is in every step of every process, so that we can take it from this sort of probability based, you got an 80% chance of Alzheimer's, to a very certain, you have 100% chance if, and this was the key, the difference between the 80 and 20, if your environment, nutrition, and lifestyle load that you're putting on the genetics is matched to what you're capable of. And that was what was missing.
Okay.
Mapping the systems and the way the body actually works so that it makes sense. And then understanding of the 80% that got it and the 20% that didn't, what were their habits? Because you're not born with Alzheimer's, you're not born with breast cancer, you're not born with diabetes, right? Everyone gets sick around the age of 50. That's the American dream, your first chronic disease. By the age of 60, you have 2. That's the average. And you spend the last 15 years of your life in treatment. That's because it takes 50 years of your body fighting this thing that you're doing wrong, where it just finally gives up and the inflammatory load is too high and it expresses into diabetes, cardiovascular disease, breast cancer, whatever it may be. So that, I would say, is the most important part of what we did. Environment, nutrition, lifestyle, personalized for your capacity so that you don't ever get sick. And if you are, let's help you reverse it instead of treat it.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. And yeah, I'm always telling people, people in the BII world are really, really focused on MTHFR. Like,
Right.
I can't tell you like the extent, but like every single time I talk with someone, they want to tell me about their MTHFR gene mutation. And, I have to kind of break it down a little bit further for them and just help them understand that, that's just one tiny little piece of
Yeah.
the whole pathway. I mean, there's so many other genes involved other than just, an MTHFR gene, which there are more than one of those too. So, we've got, HSMT1, MTRR, FUT2, all of those different genes, and those are a part of the picture. And you have various different cofactors involved, the nutrient cofactors. And so that could be, the methylcobalamin or cobalamin, folate, things like that. And so when I think about someone who knows that they have an MTHFR gene mutation and they believe that that means that they can't detox. I hear that a lot. And that they have to have the methylated form of those B vitamins. And so what I have seen actually is in some cases, depending on the genes, and I'm no like genetic expert yet, but it really depends on the person. You can give one person, a certain amount of methylated folate, and a different person the same amount of methylated folate, and the two people may react very, very differently. Right.
Yep, sure.
Depending on the combination of genes, that same dose could throw one person over into like a panic attack. Right.
Yep.
And
Migraines, panic attack. People sometimes break out in like rashes, like it's the process. So your body is doing whatever it believes your ancestors did. You inherited your genetic legacy from your ancestors. So a simple thing like, did your ancestors eat beef or did they eat more lamb and goat? Because the B12 that comes from beef, you absorb in your gut. From lamb and goat, it's methylated already and kind of broken down in your tongue, under your tongue, sorry, in your mouth. Now, if you are told, hey, you had the bad MTHFR, go take some B12, and you're taking this pill and you're just peeing it out, right? Because you don't even have the genetic instruction to absorb it. Whereas I can't tell you how many people we've switched to sublingual, all of a sudden they feel like this brain fog is gone. They're a little sharp, they wake up a little earlier, they have more energy. That one thing can change everything, right? So understanding, again, going back to your perfect example of MTHFR is important, but it's the starting point. It's the start. And why does this problem exist? Genetic tests, I'll give you like a dirty secret of the industry, right? So genetic tests started off trying to understand what genes mean and trying to give people access. The investor said, hey, your science is great, but your business sucks because your DNA doesn't change. So now that you've sold somebody a test, you're never going to sell them anything again. That's what happened, right? So the big companies, like some that you mentioned of the world, started to say, well, what do we do? Because we sold this person a test, we're done. It's one and done, right? So they said, okay, we got to become a data selling business. We have all this valuable data. Let's now take that and make that our business. We can lease it, rent it, and it's reoccurring. So the upfront test isn't then designed for how do I best deliver value to the patient or the buyer of the test. It's how do I best design the collection of data for the guy who's promised that he'll pay me $5,000 per head of the data. And they need clinical evidence-based data. How do you design a drug? It's not what you need, it's what works on 7 out of 10 people, right? So the genes got the most personal thing we have, our DNA got depersonalized so that it could fit into the average-based model, the one size fits all model. And the most genetic testing companies, this is their business, unless it's a hardcore like diagnostic, like you're looking for a rare cancer or some fertility issue where there's like diagnostic level tests, but most of these consumer tests, that's what they do. So what we said is, why don't we just do what everybody wants? They want us to mine their data and give them the best possible information. And if we do that well, we can probably work with them on other things. Like it doesn't have to be only about the test. And we can't tell you how much better that has been for people and outcomes. So anyway, that's why people have that issue of MTHFR means this, because that's what works for designing a pill. And that's how the test is now designed.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I've done the 23andMe like way back in the day when it first came out. It's a
Yeah,
long time ago. And I really found like I felt like it was, I mean, all it is the raw data. Then you got to download that and then you got to plug it into some other software, right?
yeah.
To spit out a report. And even that is a lot of medical jargon. And it's really hard for the consumer to kind of pick things out that are like what's important and how does this impact my entire being, right? And how I function. And what does this even mean for me? So I think that what you guys are doing is really rather amazing. And it's why I'm so excited about it. Because it makes everything actionable, right? And
Yep.
it gives you that sense of power back. So
And sorry, I was going to say you're giving us the credit, but I have to give kudos to you too, because the work that we did to get, and this is exactly what we do. What we're saying is the genes are the starting point, but what problem are you trying to solve? Right?
mhm,
People that are listening to here today, we already know what's going on. I just want to know that what's wrong, how do I fix it?
yeah,
Right? Science, great. As long as I know the science is real and accurate, great. But I don't need to read MTHFR, step number, da 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 da. What am I going to do with that information? So what do? We say that you are a person that knows this problem well. We have good science. Let's interpret it for that problem, right?
yeah,
Data is really dumb unless you ask it the right questions. It's just information. You
right.
have to know what to ask it and structure it in a way that it's actually consumable and usable. And that's the beauty of what we really enjoy doing is working with a specialist or somebody that has a focus like yourself and saying, what do you know about this problem? And let's ask the data questions that speak to that. And that's what, and as I told you when we first started talking, this is something I've been wanting to do for a couple of years in terms of BI because we had patients, but we just didn't have somebody like you to work with. Right. So
Right.
now that's what we did is we now have the ability to, instead of here's the standard report we give everybody, now try and get somebody to understand this information,
Yeah.
which is what genetic testing is right now. It's like, no, let's look at the problem and we will ask the question of the data so that you're getting exactly what you need in plain English for your problem. The rest of it's there also if you want to dig deep and geek out on it. But here's 2 pages, easy to read, that speaks to this. And you know
Mhm.
exactly what to do now.
Yeah. I mean, the possibilities I feel like are endless. So,
Yeah.
and I think it's really interesting too, because you had mentioned, connecting and working together on this and partnering. But I just remember the story you told me when we first had a conversation about partnering together and how you had brought this to another specific person who runs a Facebook group for breast implant illness. And I probably don't even have to say the name of it. People will just know who it is.
Yeah.
And they shut the door on you.
Yeah.
And I'm
Listen,
thinking, why in the world would anyone do that when they have to hear when they hear what you have to say, right? I mean, it's not always. There's a lot of lab tests, and especially genetic testing out there that is not doing what you're doing, and so it's really not all that helpful. But this is so different than what else is out there on the market.
yeah.
It just makes me wonder what is the intention behind a group like that if they're not going to be open to offering solutions, real
It
solutions.
was a strange experience. So it was actually a patient that was working with us at the time of research. And this person said, have you seen this Facebook group? I said, what? There's like 80, I don't know what the number is now, but at the time it was like 80,000 people on there. Like there's 80,000 people talking about BI in one place. I was blown away, right? I said, we need to get in there. She said, okay, I'll send a message. And da, da. So she sent them, they sent some information to send back. At the time, we were actually working with a local college here to build a research project that was actually being funded by the government. We brought this to them and
Oh,
said that we figured this out. This thing that is being shunned upon, that if you go to your doctor, they tell you isn't even real, right? We actually figured we cracked the code on it. Why does some women have no problem, some
yeah,
get kind of sick, and some are bedridden?
yeah,
Right? Why is there that disparity between these three? We figured that out. And now, if you figure that out, you also know what to do about it because we figured out the root cause, right? So, this local college here actually got a government grant and built this research project. We said, all we need now is people to be in the research. So, we approached this group and we sent them a test. and said, just proofs in the pudding. You don't need to talk to us, do the test and just see what information we can give you.
Mhm.
They shut us out. I thought that it was, but I also understood that at that time I didn't push because if the nature of this and how it's so difficult to speak to the mainstream medical community about things that are not believed, you also need to protect it and not have the wrong people sort of infiltrating and trying to figure
Yeah.
out what are you guys talking about, you
Yeah.
know. So I understand that protective measure that's needed, but all that needed to happen was test it, right? See if we can actually say something you haven't heard before, which is where we're at now.
Yeah. It's amazing. And I see a bunch of you posting things in the comments in the chat, and feel free to post questions because we'll go through and see if how many we can address at the end. So, all right, let's talk a little bit more like specifics. So when I first started hearing you talk about this test, as I said, my wheels were turning and I was thinking, well, how can this be helpful for people like me who've been through a breast implant illness? And so I see a number of ways. And so I think that this could be helpful for, first of all, possibly helping people make a decision about
Right.
explanting or not explanting, and a lot of people I think come to this decision. It's not they don't come to it lightly, and myself included. It took me 4+ years from the point at which I thought, I wonder if this could be my breast implants, to finally making the decision and explanting. It was a good 4-year stretch. And it was because
Right.
I didn't have any concrete evidence. It was a hunch, it was an instinct and it was right. But nonetheless, it was an instinct. And I had spent, $7,500 getting them placed, and to get them out, you all know, it's going to be another $10, $12, $15,000, who knows? And that price is so great to have to go through all of that and maybe not have the outcome you're anticipating. Right. So I got to a place where my why was just bigger than me, and I decided to get them out. But I probably would have made a decision a lot sooner had I had a test like this that could maybe have helped me see all my entire genetic profile, and what specific genes might be influencing the expression of these symptoms that I'm having after having breast implants. So I think that could be helpful if someone is really on the fence and just really unsure and not confident in that decision. Then let's see what shows up on the genetics, and how that might be influencing your immune system, your detoxification pathways, autoimmunity, that sort of thing that breast implants are going to play a part in.
Going back to what you said about detox, and that's one of the big things people look at. And it kind of makes me cringe when I hear what you're saying, that what I do know clinicians are saying, hey, you got the good MTHFR, your detox is great. You got the bad MTHFR, your detox is, that's not even detox, that's methylation.
Yeah.
Right. So, but this is what people are being told. I've heard this many times. Detox. So the reason why most genetic tests don't tell you about detox is because you have to run a completely separate test to get it right. What does that mean? When you're looking at, and I see somebody here commented that they have genetic tests, if you've had a genetic test, you'll see that you get a result with a SNP. It's like a spelling mistake in the gene, right?
Yeah.
Instead of a C, it's a T, which means something. That's a SNP test, which is what most genetic tests are, because that's what sort of, again, the data buyers want. That's one type of the most minimal version of a variation. There's also something called an insertion or deletion, where if there's a spelling mistake, this is like a whole paragraph was missing. Remember, a gene is thousands of letters long, and we have 22,000 genes, right? So imagine if that SNP spelling mistake is so impactful that genetic testing companies tell you about it. What if a whole paragraph is gone? Or a paragraph is duplicated twice? Imagine the impact of that.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to the detox genes, there's something called a copy number variation. Forget about the spelling mistake, forget about the paragraph. You might not even have the gene, completely missing the gene. Or you have an extra copy of it. So now if a SNP makes that much difference, that 23andMe will tell you, here, this is important information. What if you don't even have the gene? So this is why most testing companies don't tell you about it, because that's a whole other, literally we have to run 3 tests to give you the data that we give you. We're blessed to be partnered with the Canadian government and using one of their research labs. So they sort of do it for us on a cost basis. Otherwise it would be literally triple the price, right? So in that, glutathinization is actually detox. Methylation is the sort of protective measure. If you are toxic, then you need to deal with the inflammation being caused. But glutathinization is step one, which means send glutathione to a toxin, bind, send to the liver to metabolize and get rid of it.
Mhm.
If you're missing, forget it. And there's three key genes. There's GSTT1, it's called, which is the main sort of police that's going through the blood looking for stuff. There's GSTP, which is I breathe things in, and there's like a filter here. And
Mhm.
then GSTM, which is I have in my gut another filter. So these three main genes, there's others, but these are the three big ones. Two of them, the gut one and the blood one, you could be missing them.
Mm.
So now, again, why am I told that my MTHFR is great? I should not have BII. Well, what if I don't clear the toxic metabolites or whatever's going on, or my cells are under so much load from the fight that's going on here that it's not able to deal with everything else, right? We can
Yeah.
predict that genetically by looking for more. So there's women for whom the explant is removed and there's all this, microbial activity and bacteria and all that, and it was okay. And there's some for whom that same level is way too much,
Yeah.
right? So your ability to cope with it is your genetic instruction manual. What were you designed to cope with? This is same thing with Lyme disease. You have people that don't even know they have it, people that get like a kind of a flu, and people that are bedridden for 6 months.
Right.
The exact same thing, because their ability, it's not a different disease, same bacteria, your genetic ability to fight it, which means now that I know this about myself, now what do I do? And that's the most important part, right?
Yeah.
What do I now focus on? Where do I work so that I don't have that horrible outcome? And
Yeah.
anyways, that's what we've done.
That's amazing. Yeah. It's just so, it's like Christmas. I keep telling people it's like Christmas.
Yeah,
But so, and I see that a lot clinically as far as like who, different people have different varying abilities to handle things. And it could be detox work, it could be a kill protocol of some kind targeting some microorganism, whether it be, Borrelia or Babesia or, whatnot, parasite work, things like that. And some people tolerate it fine. And some people, like they just can't handle the endotoxin load
right.
that the body's trying to process as it's dealing with those organisms. So I can see that exactly how you described it, but in a clinical presentation,
Yep.
which is really
And
interesting.
the thing that you just reminded me of also is that, we try and look at how systems interplay. So it's not just, hey, we map the systems of the genes, right? As opposed to just the genes. We also cross the systems. Like, how does one connect or alter the other? And one of the big ones is up here, the brain, mood and behavior,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because when you say it's 2 out of 10 or 8 out of 10, what does that actually mean? That's your perception, right? Versus empirically what's actually happening. Hard to measure. How do you measure pain, or how do you measure irritability or whatever, right? So what we spent a lot of time on, and when we work with people clinically, the first thing we always do before we deal with whatever their problem is up here. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you don't understand how you perceive and what your beliefs are actually rooted in, you don't know to what degree to deal with this stuff, like how much to turn the dials, right? So literally, I don't need to meet you if I have your DNA to understand how you deal with stress, trauma. Are you irritable? Do you procrastinate? Are you reward seeking and entrepreneurial? Should you be an accountant? Like, all of that is hardwired by the chemicals in your brain. And the genes that drive those chemicals are black and white. We know this already.
Mm.
So for some women for whom you give them the bad news and that trauma is going to imprint and stick, there's a gene for that, literally. There's a
Wow.
there's a PTS gene that determines how well do you either completely ignore or totally imprint and bind fear, anxiety, trauma. So
Mm.
that post, that PTSD of what happened, I don't look the same anymore. How do you cope with it? Is that somewhere you need to focus, right?
Mm.
That the whole irritability or serotonin, my ability to regulate my mood, and am I overreacting to things that really don't mean that much?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Do I know this about myself? When everyone's saying it's not that big of a deal, maybe it's not actually that big of a deal. But for me, I don't perceive it that way,
Sure.
right? Then there's the person who thinks too quick and moves too fast and not going to dive deep, and they're like, just get it out, right? They're not going to actually dive deep and think Then there's a person who's the opposite that overthinks and they're kind of flaky about stuff and makes a commitment to themselves but never actually does it. So all this stuff is hardwired. Now imagine understanding what you think you're seeing, but what's really going on,
Mm-hmm.
both for decision making, but more importantly for recovery.
Yeah.
This is really important in recovery because you know where to focus, how to focus, what to actually work on, how do you think. This has made a huge difference for our patients because all of a sudden it's not one size fits all. Like, go do this. No, but this is how I need to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that. That completely changes everything we know about the coaching aspect
Yeah.
of guiding someone in their healing journey.
Yeah. For
Like
sure.
it changes everything you do, as far as that coaching aspect of helping someone through that. And I can see how that would be really beneficial because I see some women who see a result on a piece of paper and it like throws them into PTSD, just like you said.
Yeah.
And then I see some people that are just like, all right, it's just another fact. Let's just address it. Like, what can I do?
Yeah. Exactly.
And so, yeah, I mean, having that knowledge about how someone's brain functions and works and how they process information, how they respond, what kind of stress that creates for them, gosh, that would be so amazing.
Yeah.
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 And then,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Yeah. So this is, you just reminded me of a particular person for whom before getting on the call, we already knew that the first 10 minutes was just going to be her complaining about why we're wrong about everything we're saying. And there's a very specific profile where the serotonin is like crazy dysregulated and they have really high dopamine levels. So they're not really interested in much because they get pleasure from stuff anyway, right?
Okay.
And that combined with the really dysregulated serotonin where they're kind of seeing all these little details and nuances, they're just looking for problems.
Hmm.
Right? So we know who these people are now, and we know the first 10 minutes is let them vent and tell us why we're wrong. And then we have to slowly unpack that. And by the end of it, these people are usually the best, most compliant because
Hmm.
once they buy into something, they're in it. Right. So, anyways, you just reminded me of that person. It was like a week ago.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so then I want to mention the second way that I can see this test being really helpful for people, and that is for helping someone. Well, you tell me. This is a question for you, I guess I would say, because I'm making an assumption, but I'm curious to know if you've had any experience with this. So my thought is, if we know someone's DNA who has breast implants
Right.
and maybe isn't sick,
Right.
but they're concerned, about the fact that they have breast implants and they're hearing all these stories about people really struggling with their health and not getting better and needing to explant and all of that. For that person, with this information, could they then really dial in on kind of optimizing their genetic expression with this knowledge, and then preventing the expression of breast implant illness from ever happening?
Yeah. So it's not as binary as let's prevent the illness, right? Because there's no direct genetic cause. It's like, let's look at all the systems and which ones lead to this inflammatory load, right? And let's start to correct those things. And if you get your body to the right level of inflammatory load, which is slim to none, like low, you should be like you should be healthy,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's some people for whom we say that your body's ability to cope is so low that we can almost be assured that unless you're like super clean and everything is perfect and you're supplementing perfectly everything, you're going to have a problem.
Okay.
So we've even recommended to certain plastic surgeons that it should be a screening tool. Like, how do you give somebody something where 30% of women are going to get sick if you're
Mhm.
not screening them first to tell them, here's the risks, by the way, for you, it's a little elevated, right? We can now do that. So it's more about understanding where those risks are coming from. Like we said, it could be multiple things. It could be from here. It could be from methylation. It could be from detox. It could be your ability to deal with North American food, carbs and fats and all this stuff is just not there. So that may be causing an inflammatory load, which tied with this other thing takes you over the threshold that your body can't cope, right?
Yeah.
So there's 3, 4, 5 different areas we look at. Then we can say, okay, you're going to make the decision, base it on this. Base it on, if you fix these things, you might get to 7 out of 10. But even then there's some people for even if you fix all this stuff, you're still going to be 2 out of 10.
Okay.
Right? Because it gets to an extreme. And that's why again you say I'm not sick, I got a flu and I'm in bed. Why three different outcomes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, so
Yeah.
we can dial into those things. But really the tricky thing, and this is why people need help of people like yourself, because it's one thing to be told, it's another thing to actually change your behaviors.
Hmm.
That's the biggest part of this whole thing, because it's very difficult to take information that's so different from what you do, and you're not 5 years old or 7 years old, you're 20, 30, 40, 50, with you have habits hardwired that you've developed. The habit change is the trickiest part. Creating a new identity. I no longer eat this, I now eat this. I can't even remember that person anymore who used to eat that stuff. That habit change stuff takes weeks, months,
Yeah.
and you need somebody to sort of coach you through it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then let's see here. So screening tool, yes, I agree. That was another thought I had too.
Yeah,
Um, and it's not like a black and white situation, right? Like you described. It's really not like, okay, here's your genes. These are the genes that we've associated with people who have breast implant illness. And you have this many of them. So you are going to get it. You shouldn't have breast implants. It's not that black and white. There's so many other variables there. So we can't just blame the genes for everything.
exactly.
Right. But they're a piece of the puzzle. And I think an important enough piece of the puzzle to warrant having tools like this.
Yeah, the genes basically tell you your capacity. What does your body do? It's literally the definition. Literally, genes are instructions. So
Mm-hmm.
your genetic code is literally your human instruction manual. Your
Mm-hmm.
genes are telling your cells what to do all day long. That's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
So if your code is like this or that, it's two different instructions,
Mm-hmm.
right? Do I clear this oxidant from my cell, or does it just sit there?
Yeah.
Depends what instruction you have.
Yeah.
So maybe you had an ancestry that didn't move a lot, that didn't have much oxidative stress, so they didn't need to clear oxidation. Maybe you had an ancestry from sub-Saharan Africa that used to run miles every day, so you needed to clear oxidation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you look at marathon runners, and you'll see some that are, great career in marathon running that look great. They look like this was the best thing they could do for their health. And there's some that are all haggardly and their skin is wrinkled and they're thin. They're not fat, but they look worn out,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that same genetic instruction to help them support the recovery of that heavy load is different. So yeah, so it comes back to personalizing and understanding what your body's capacity actually is, being able to read your instruction manual,
Yeah.
and then making the right decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no longer one size fits all. Oh, let me try this. Let's see if it works. Let me try this and see if it works. You still have to do stuff. Having your DNA hand doesn't mean you flipped a switch and you're healthy. It means you now know it's like a hack. I'm going to shortcut and make the right decisions the
Yeah.
first time,
Takes the
right?
guesswork out of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a big reason why I no longer make like really, this is just one example here, a small one. But I no longer really make very like specific dietary recommendations across the board for everyone,
Right.
because I've never really believed that one particular diet is right for every single person. But I also think that you can learn to listen to your body and get a feel for what foods make you feel good when you eat them versus what foods make you feel tired, cranky, irritable, maybe not sleep very well, things like that when you eat them. And so I think this would be so helpful just to take all that guesswork out of it. Someone doesn't have to go through that trial and error of figuring it out.
Yep. So eating is the biggest and sort of most stressful thing that our body does. Out of all the biochemical processes, this metabolization of food is what ages us the most, what causes the most damage to our bodies. It's what you need to stay alive, obviously, right? But that process is the most taxing process of all the things we do. So if you're going to add to that layers of eating the wrong stuff, which is not the same for everybody. As an example, just last night, I was speaking to a gentleman who's in Florida that used to be a ranking tennis player. He was like a top ranked known celebrity tennis player. He's now older and he's pre-diabetic,
Mm.
right? So he also just getting on the call immediately, like bloated, big, like it didn't look like a ranking tennis player. So we dove into his genetics, and he had both for the fat metabolization genetics and starch. So not necessarily carbs, but the fast carbs, the bread, rice, pasta, sugar, the worst possible for both.
Mm,
So the way your body deals with food, it always leans on sort of starches and sugars first. It's the easiest fuel to burn. Then it will go to proteins, like even frayed muscle tissue, like your own muscle. Then it will go to fats, right? That's the very last thing. It's the hardest fuel to burn, but once it gets into burning fats, it feels really good and you keep going. So with him, I told him your body struggles so much breaking down starches into glucose for fuel that you're not even getting to the fat.
mm,
And that's why every day you're bloated and you have a carb crash and you're sitting on the couch an hour after eating, you just can't, because your body's struggling. And is, by the way, genetically, his insulin response, which we're also able to look at, was also suboptimal. It wasn't the worst, like the fat and the carbs, but it wasn't good. So he wasn't converting the starch into fuel, and he was also having a dysregulated like insulin spike because his body didn't deal with it well. Another layer, people with dark skin, brown people, have the same insulin response from saturated fats as most people do from sugar.
mm.
And this is a very subtle nuance where you don't learn this because where's medicine studied on white European males, right?
Right.
So the belief is that all humans are white European males. What, and even that Western Europeans, even the Eastern European males aren't considered, which they are different, right? So we're told that insulin is a sugar problem. Well, for brown people, it's also a fat problem,
Mm,
right? And that's
yeah.
something you just don't hear or learn. So we unpacked all of his stuff, just had to do with what he was eating. And he thought he was eating the right stuff. He was eating his athlete meals with the carb and the fat and everything together. And it was just completely wrong for him. He needed to be eating like a lean protein with greens and his carbs in a completely separate meal,
Wow. Yeah.
right? Because his inability to get through that struggle didn't allow him to ever get to the fat.
Mm,
He just kept storing it and storing it and storing it. And then his insulin was going crazy. So that one tweak, that's literally was the problem. That was his whole problem.
my
So now
goodness.
imagine that level of
Yeah.
stress on the body, right? And removing that stress.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden just things feel good,
Yeah.
right? And that load from this may also decrease. And you may get yourself to that threshold where it's not a problem anymore,
Hmm.
right? Because these things kind of stack, these inflammatory loads, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Cause I mean, it's so far beyond even just do you do better with fats or carbs,
Right.
you know, which is what I would assume you would get out of this information is like, do better with like this, a Mediterranean diet or a keto diet
Right.
or, you know, whatnot, and or a vegan or vegetarian diet, which I think very few people on this planet do well with. But
Right.
it's even deeper than that. It's like the timing of the nutrients that you're eating and whether you
For
should eat
sure.
them together or separate, or oh my gosh, it's just fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. And we can go on forever. We could talk about fats and carbs for an hour, right?
Yeah.
It just depends how deep somebody wants to dive.
Yeah. Okay. So then I think for my purposes, because the majority of the women that I work with are post explant, I do work with some pre explant
Mhm.
women who just want to like optimize their body before surgery. But the majority of the time they're already explanted. So then where I see this test being helpful and coming into play is, I mean, really kind of along the lines of what we've been discussing, is just really optimizing the diet, lifestyle, and supplementation recommendations for really dialing in on how to um, I guess the word optimize keeps coming up, but
Yeah.
maximizing or optimizing the body's function in general so
Yeah.
that you can detox better, so that you can, repair your immune system. But your immune system will start targeting those organisms that need to be targeted, so that you can start feeling better faster rather than going through all of this trial and error of, okay, what diet is best for you and what supplements are best for you. And not that there's a lot of trial and error in what I do, but I'm thinking about from someone who's going at it on their own as their own guide, let's say, that can be really, really confusing. And there's a lot of just kind of blanket recommendations out there, especially in different Facebook groups, of what you should do. And they're spoken about in a way that leads you to believe that because you have BII, you should be doing it this way. Like everyone who has BII is the same. and we're not. We're all very unique individuals, and I can see that clinically, and in just the women that I've worked with, and even women that I haven't worked with, women who come to me and I talk with them, just have a conversation, and they tell me kind of what they've been doing and how, what hasn't helped, basically.
Yeah.
So let's talk about for a bit here, exactly what are the key areas that you focus on for helping to give recommendations to help someone kind of dial in on what they should be doing. Like, what are the key 6 or
Sure.
7
So there's in the
categories?
report, so as we've been through, I think our research was 7,000 patients. So we were, and this is the one thing that I didn't mention earlier. Why do we have these insights that other genetic testing companies don't? Genetic testing companies don't meet patients. They
Yeah.
study DNA, they get something in the mail, and they do data work. They try and sort of find the needle in the haystack. What we said is that's great. That will teach you more about genes, but that won't give you outcomes. You need clinical work. So we actually one by one met with 6,000 patients, right? Over a period of, and we tracked them and we worked with them and we helped them and we actually got them better. And every
Mhm.
time we would figure out a profile, it was like, here's another one in the bucket. Now we know how to deal with this. Now we know how to deal with this. Now we know how to deal with this. And that's the only way to practice personalized medicine. Personalized means it has to be about you. And once we figure out you, okay, great. We figure now maybe the next time somebody comes with the exact same profile, we know what to do now.
Yeah.
And that's how we got. So we got to the point where we didn't know how many sort of combinations there would be. So as an example, with female hormone health, which is a huge thing
Yeah.
that we deal with, we started off with an infinite number of this woman has this problem, this woman, and we realized after being through hundreds of women that hormonally and genetically, women fall into one of 6 buckets every time. There's literally 6 maps, genetic maps for hormones for all women. Now we got it down to you fit into one of these buckets. We already know what to do. We
Hmm.
already know what problems you're going to have. We already know what solutions to provide you. Right. So, yeah. So in terms of that, it's that research allowed us to be more actionable. It's like we know we've worked with patients. We know what's going on. And here all of a sudden is what you need because we've already done this with 200 other women that have the exact same genetic profile as you.
Hmm.
Right. So that was that big missing piece was that clinical study.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And it's amazing that you guys took the time to really get it right, and really meet with these people and create so much more value in what you're doing.
Yeah.
So
Oh, and sorry, I didn't even answer your question about the system.
so there's 6 core
Yeah.
systems,
Yeah,
right?
there's 6 systems. Yeah. So in there, so what I was getting to by telling you that is that because we studied all these people, we understood what kind of everybody needs to know.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not talking about deep clinical, like I have fibromyalgia, help me with that problem. We're not there yet. What we're saying is, I want to be version 2.0 of myself.
Mhm.
After being through these 6,000 people, we now kind of know what that is. Like, here's what you need to know that will get you into a better place. And then if there's something more clinical like breast cancer, fibromyalgia, BII, we can dive deep. So what are those 6 things? Sleep. If you're not sleeping properly, you're probably not healthy. So we have to genetically figure out why you can't fall asleep, why you can't stay asleep, or why you wake up after a full night of sleep and still feel horrible. Those are 3 different things genetically, and we've kind of figured those out. Cardiovascular health, how do it's the biggest killer. Yeah, unfortunately, it's much more severe in women. 64% of women that have their first cardiovascular event will die on that event.
Wow.
And there's no previous symptoms, no previous warning signs. 64% of women on their first cardiovascular event will die. It's
Hmm.
much, much more severe for women because of the hormone interplay, which is something we look at, right?
Yeah.
So then we get into diet and nutrition, obviously a big one. Then we get into fitness and hormones. So we don't dive into the hormones clinically at this level. It's more about body type. Like here's my goals. How do I actually get there? Hair, skin. Why do I have acne? These types of things. So what are your hormones actually doing? And a big part of it is body type and fitness, right? And then how do I work out? What time do I work out? Those types of things. Then we get into immunity, detox, and inflammation, which is the kind of the root of all disease.
Yeah.
And the last one, which is the biggest one, is mood and behavior. It's the biggest report, which is here's your brain. Here's how your brain actually functions. Knowing this, you can do all this stuff better. So that's what if somebody were to go to our website and buy the test, that's what they would get. What I really love about what we're doing here with you is we collaborated to say, here's all this data in these 6 reports. How do we extrapolate what's relevant to this community, to the BI? Because we don't have a BII section in the report. We know what to say, but it's not in those reports. So the work we did together is now all of a sudden we were able to sit with you and say, here, what are the main problems? Where do we need to focus? And we're reinterpreting that same stuff for this problem. Right now, all of a sudden, when it comes to whether it's a microbial activity, like what all these things that we're dealing with, there's a document now attached to this report, which people can get through you, that allows them to interpret. And I saw that question come up, well, I have somebody review my results. How do I get this information about my diet, et cetera? So the way we were designing the reports, they're self-navigable. Like if you read them, you'll get them. You don't need someone's help. I would suggest, this is when people are working with you on coaching programs, that they incorporate this, and that's where somebody can guide you and dive you deeper. But this addendum document that was created between our collaborative work allows you to sort of use this report for that purpose. You now have these 2 tools, right? So my belief is if you have these in your hand, you don't need anyone's help in terms of the information. Where you need the help is the behavior change, and that's where you come in and really guide people. So anyways, long answer to your question.
Yeah. And so let me tell you how I see this playing a part, because just thinking about these specific categories of things too, it really it's in significant alignment with what I already do and teach people. So, the biggest thing in my mind, and those women who are on today who've worked with me or are working with me know that I always say sleep is number one. Sleep is the number one most important thing for your healing, because if you're not sleeping, you can't detox and you can't regenerate your body. Because it's during certain times of the night where your body is either focused on detox or like regeneration. And that has to do with deep sleep and REM sleep and those sleep cycles. And so most people that I've worked with, their sleep is suboptimal. And so how are they ever going to get better if they're chronically sleep deprived?
Yep.
And so how to optimize sleep for you specifically is so, I mean, just that alone, I would buy this test just for that. And then thinking about, of course, immunity and detox, those are the second most important things with regard to this test. And what I think is really important for women with BII is that we need to work on restoring immune function and supporting and optimizing the detoxification pathways. And there's an order to all of this that I take my clients through that I think is really important. But, a lot of the things can be implemented without necessarily, going about the deeper work that we, do when we work together. So I think this is a really good place for people to really just start optimizing the things that they're doing and the way that they're supporting their body so that they can heal better and faster, regardless of whether we're working together or not. And then let's see here. And so I want to clarify too, because anytime I say detoxification, not everyone, thinks detox or says detox and means the same thing. So what I mean by it is going to be very different than what most people mean by it. And so from my perspective, when I talk about detox, I'm talking about active chelation, like actively pulling those toxins out of the body. What you would see on this test is not instruction for how to do that. It is more how to just optimize the biochemical detoxification pathways in your body so that you can,
and where to focus
so that you can start eliminating better.
Right.
And then diet, of course, is key, but not as important as sleep. And then I think too, hormones, like people aren't going to feel better unless they have hormone balance.
Yeah.
Especially women. I mean, women more specifically, because our hormones play such a significant part in how we feel day to day.
Yeah. And it's that one side. I would say of everything we dealt with, the thing that is the worst sort of experience medically is female hormone health. It's almost guaranteed that any woman that has a female hormone problem is going to tell us that their experience clinically sucks.
Yeah.
Like it's taken for granted that you're supposed to have problems. You're a woman, it's hormones. What are you complaining about? where if you actually understood what was going on, uh, it's so black and white versus this gray area it's made out to be,
Mhm.
that you can truly understand for hormone dominance. Do you have an overload of estrogens or testosterone or androgens? Hormone toxicity. What do you metabolize that into? Right? Is it toxic or not? The byproduct. Clearance. The same detox genes also clear your hormones. Right. So if you're missing key detox genes, well, your toxic estrogen is floating around causing problems, which is why women have so much more of a severe issue with cardiovascular disease, because they're combining that load with the estrogen toxicity, which is already causing an inflammatory problem. Right.
Mhm.
So that one thing I would say is probably the most impactful thing we've done in terms of the delta between where it is today and where we can get people. Right.
Yeah.
Um, and then, sorry, somebody was asking about privacy, data privacy. So this is what we were talking about earlier, where the genetic industry is a data selling business because of the fact that the business model sucks. You sell somebody a test and that's it. You never need to sell them any because their DNA doesn't change.
Right.
Right? It's not like cholesterol where you get it tested every 6 months or a year or 2 years, whatever. So most genetic testing in companies have gone down that route of I sell data and that's really my business. The customer just allows me to collect data. What we said is, why don't we be the people that mine the data and continue in a conversation or relationship with a customer? So our reoccurring business is through better insights, more data, more information, pairing solutions, whether it's supplements or therapies or working with people like you and bringing them into the ecosystem, right? That type of thing. So we don't sell data. Our team can't even see it. It's all anonymized and aggregated because we don't need to pull your data and sell it to someone. What we need to do is when you log in, there's a new report in 6 months that wows you about breast cancer or about whatever, and then you're going to want to buy that report. So we want to keep working with you to keep helping you with more things, as opposed to take this and sell it to Glaxo or Pfizer,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
And I think that's really important for people to understand is that is a huge difference between you guys and a lot of the other companies out there. And the the biggest the 23andMe, they were bought out. How long ago was it? Like 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, so their main investor is actually Glaxo, right? So, I think it was a couple of years ago. It was 2018, I think. They were funded $300 million by Glaxo, and you wonder why. And then all of a sudden, you saw billboards all over Times Square, and because data collection, data collection, data collection, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Ugh.
So I see there's a Q&A thing here with some questions. Do
Yeah.
we go through
Let's
that?
go ahead and yeah, let's take
I
a
can
look
kind
at
of
some.
rapid fire through them.
Okay, so Diana's excited. Okay, out of all of you guys who are on here currently, who is going to do this test? Because I already have mine ordered. And several of my clients who are actively working with me are also doing this test. I'm even doing it for my husband and my mother-in-law because I think like any of my family members could also benefit from this too. And I think, when you think about this is like a side note here, but I think about like how many of my family members have health issues and the fact that it's like impossible to give advice to people close to you because first of all, they don't listen to you.
Yeah.
I feel like if they're not paying you for your advice, they're not going to listen to you. They're not going to take action. And then also, like, I feel like people close to me take advice better from someone else. So if someone else says the same thing I say, they're probably going to do something about it. So I think this is going to be, I'm just going to make sure everyone I know has this test. So anyway, yes, I think it's going to be a game changer too, Diana. Let's see here. And Naomi says, as a breast cancer thriver MBII, this is great info I've seen Kashif at the biohacking conference too. Yep. Stephanie says over 150,000 members. Okay, yeah, that was the Facebook group.
Right.
Satin says, I've had so many genetic tests done and they're horrible. All they do is prescribe supplements with no hope for a long-term change, which is key. Yeah. And I think the difference is we're intelligently supplementing, right? Not to like biohack necessarily, but to
Right.
really just optimize the expression of your DNA.
Yeah.
Um, And let's see here. This one seems different and I can't wait to take it. Yes, it is different. Naomi says, I think I know this. Yes. Okay. Sarah Hill says, sign me up. Diana, when I have the call to review my results, yes, yes,
We got
Diana, the answer is yes. Um, and that was like the biggest thing you're hoping to get out of it, Diana, is sleep. And I agree. Sleep is so important. Christy, hi, Christy says, okay, she already asked about, we answered this question about privacy.
right.
Okay. Who is this? Amanda, I think. I can't see the whole name. Oh, there it is. Amanda says, thank you so much. I have to work out, or I have to go to work, but I'm sad to leave. Yeah. Well, you'll get the replay, guys. Let's see here. Already sent mine in, waiting impatiently for results.
So
Yeah,
progress.
okay, so it's a way to check progress.
Yeah. So right now, we actually just launched a new portal that allows you to track progress. Before it was all manual because again, we were a research company. We weren't working with outsiders, let's say. I think that just recently launched. I do know that Black Friday, Dave Asprey did this thing and there was a whole flood of people that wanted to get tested. So they're a little overwhelmed. That being said, it should be at the lab now, which means it's the same question came up again. Yeah, so the test, so the standard, like if you go get a 23andMe, it's usually 5-6 weeks, right? It also used to take us that same time. We just opened a new lab specifically for this test only, just to make it faster, and it's brought the time down to like 2 weeks now. The only thing I would say is that this particular time, is the busiest time, so it may take that to 3 weeks or maybe 4, but it should be in that range. And then somebody's saying I'm gluten and dairy intolerant. Yes, that's in the report. So we look at both lactose, gluten, and non-celiac and celiac. So there's also there's two layers of the gut. There's what can I eat, the actual thing, and then there's what's the food laced with, meaning the chemicals,
Yes.
pesticides, drying chemicals that your gut may not be able to detox. So there's some people that can handle the food, but they can't handle the chemicals that come along with it, and that's in the report with whether your gut can do the detox or not. Then there's a separate, there's this Q&A box. Will the results be easy for the average person? Yes, that's like we said, it's self-navigable. You can read it. It's designed that way.
Easy to read for the layperson. Yes.
Yes, designed that way intentionally. If I have mold, bacteria, or heavy metals from implants, can you detect? We're not detecting the substance. What we're detecting is your ability to cope with those things, meaning that if you did have mold, how does your body clear that? And if you don't clear it well, then you're the type of person that probably should get explanted anyway, because eventually you're going to have some microbial activity and something that's going on, right, with that capsule that forms around it. So what we would tell you is your ability to deal with that stuff, not actually measuring your blood to see how much of it you have, right? The gluten question again, and then what comes with your results. So it's these 6 reports for the 6 systems we talked about. And in them, we break down genetically where you're at, and then we talk about the problems. When we say mood and behavior, we don't say, here's what genes you have. We say anxiety, low, medium, high risk, and here's why, and here's what to do about it. Depression, low, medium, high risk, here's why, and here's what to do about it. So we break it down so it's very easy to digest. If you want to get into the science, it's also there, right? How does it work? No, you don't need to go to your doctor. It's a saliva kit. So we literally ship you a kit, you spit in a tube, you ship it back. There's a preservative in there, so it lasts months, so a couple weeks back and forth is not a big deal. But it's literally a saliva kit that we ship to you to spit out. Pricing. So I know that you offered some kind of promo discount on it, but that package, by the way, one thing I should mention is that this BII report we don't sell it. Like it's not on, if you go to our website, it's not available. They have to go through your link because we worked on that together. So we can share that link with everybody.
Yep.
But the package is usually, I think it's $4.99. So when we used to work with executives and athletes, they were actually paying us between $5,000 to $10,000 to do their personal, because it was research and we were hands-on with them. That we then built the artificial intelligence so that the reports can give you all the information that our scientists used to get from analyzing. And now it's like, I think it's the 499 for all of it, including the BII stuff, right?
Yeah. And
Uh,
then, but the deal is that if you purchase within the 24 hours of this, that you're going to get $100 off. So that brings it down to $399. Right.
yes.
So we're doing that 24-hour promo. You don't need a code for it. It's just going to be in the link, which I'm going to put in the chat right now.
And the last question about the epigenetics. So this is the same thing that I was saying about genetics is also true about epigenetics. It's great to know your epigenetics, but if you don't know what to do about it, all you've been told is, hey, biologically, you're 2 years older than you should be. Why? What do I do?
Yeah.
Right? So what we're saying is that through your genetics, we'll determine what you're actually capable of, which means what habit should I actually develop. You at that point, your epigenetics will correct themselves. Because if you're doing what's matched to your genetics, you're not fighting with your epigenetics, you're supporting them.
Right.
That's the whole point. But yes, we actually did partner with an epigenetics company for the purpose of research to measure. So on the day one, we actually do the test to see like your biological age, your methylation markers, and then 6 months after working with people, we test again to show that their age actually and the load decreased.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessary for you to know this information. This is more just proves things work. But this is where we're bridging the gap between I know my epigenetics, but I don't know what to do. It's more important to know what to do, and then your epigenetics get fixed.
Right.
That's what we
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. So that's good. And let's see here. So there are a couple of, well, the one that we're offering today, let's see here. I actually think that was the wrong, is that the wrong link? No, that's the right link. It's at the bottom. It just says special offer. And the code is implant illness, but it's already going to be like attached when you add the kit to the cart. So you don't have to actually put the code in. For those of you who maybe for some reason don't want the BII report, or you want to maybe have someone else in your family also get access to this test, I have a different link for you that you can share. And like I said, that anyone can benefit from this test and from all of the different actionable items that you get in the report. So I'll put both links in the chat so that, let's see here.
Oh, it says to
Oh,
both.
I might have actually, here, let me put the link in for everyone. There's the link. And then
Oh,
I
and
will,
Diana had another question. Sorry, I didn't actually answer her question. I went off on a tangent. She said
okay.
that I started to answer, but I didn't finish. So, yeah, so the portal is not live, is live. And for now, Diana, to answer your question, what you're gonna get is emails from our engagement platform that will tell you if you haven't got an email, that just means it's still being tested, right? The next email you'll get is we're like a week away and we'll start to give you some videos, like content that helps you understand your report, that type of thing. So you will be sort of connected to through email. You don't need to ask, don't worry, they have it. It's November 16th. So we're now, yeah, 2 weeks there. It's probably just sort of getting scanned at the lab now, and we're maybe a week to 10 days out.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, that sounds good. And when I see it come through, if you're a client of mine asking this question, which I think it was, then I'll also email you and make sure that you got it. And we can have a conversation about it. But yeah, the reports do get emailed directly to the person who did the test, right?
Yes.
And how I noticed that there is some instruction about let's see, registering the kit. However, is that necessary to, can you?
That's for that new
Can you
portal. So
update?
there were some people that got it during that transition time where
Okay.
we had the instructions, but the portal got launched recently. So now we allow you to register your own kit. Like suppose you want to buy 5 kits and give gifts to people or whatever, they can then go register themselves, that type of thing. And then they can get tracked directly and emailed directly. So that's another reason why we built this portal so that it's easier for people to use the kits, right? And it's not like I bought 5 tests and our system sees you having 5 tests, which is not useful, right? So that's now live.
Okay. Okay. Great. That sounds good. That will reduce any confusion. And I think that's all the questions. Was that right? So
Yeah,
just for clarity, real quick here, I wanted to, someone that was anonymous asked the question about mold that you had addressed and bacteria and heavy metals and things like that. What I want to, let's see here, will this detect any of these, or do I need special testing for these? So the other part to that answer for the person who asked the question about mold, bacteria, and heavy metals is that yes, you would need additional testing to determine whether or not mold is a current issue for you or a certain bacteria is a current issue for you. Heavy metals, I just assume, is an issue for every single person living on this planet. Not necessary to test for that, but it can be done. No test is perfect with regard to any of this, though. Just you have to know that.
right.
You know, tests are helpful, but they're not always going to give you, you know, a black and white answer. And so I think that's why it's also really helpful to have this information so that regardless of whether you have a solid answer one way or the other, you're still optimizing function.
Yeah, and it's helpful. That's why it's helpful to have somebody like you to lean on, because it's overwhelming, you know, and
Yeah.
and the action plan, somebody that knows how to take these tools and use them, you're gonna get a much better result than trying to figure it out on your own. And with something so important, you don't leave it to chance. You know, this is something where you want somebody to guide you through.
Yeah. Sarah asked about a different link for someone. So the other link that I mentioned is just going to be for, you know, friends or family members. If you think that someone else that you know would benefit from this test, you can share the link with them. Or if you yourself are like beyond the point of caring about your genetics relative to breast implant illness, and you
Right.
just want the genetic information and like actionable steps, then I have a different link for you. What I'm going to do is send a follow-up email with this information, because I think it can be, I just want to make sure I have the correct links before I start plugging them in and get you the right information the first time. So the link I did share here in the chat box is the link that includes the BII report, just so you
Right.
know. And if you guys have any further questions, you can certainly reply to the email that's going to be going out. It'll be going out tomorrow morning, and you'll also have a link to the replay. And you know, I'm happy to answer whatever questions that you have. And thank you so much, Kashi, for joining us today and helping to shed light on how helpful and powerful this information can be. And I just thank you for all the work that you and the company are doing. I mean, it's so amazing to hear that someone is interested in this topic and studying it beyond just your, you know, your surgeons and people who are kind of experiencing it themselves.
Right. No, it's awesome. It was refreshing to me to see that there was a place to use. We were sitting on this research for over a year with
Hmm.
nowhere to go. Right. So it's just awesome to be able to work with you and get it out to people.
Yeah, yeah. And there's so much more research that needs to be done too. I mean, um, we just know so little about breast implant illness. We have like big picture ideas of what we think is going on here, but you know, there's never really been like a large study
Yeah,
for a long, you know, a great length of time to follow people, you know, for decades.
yeah,
And I think that's what's really needed is this big longitudinal study.
for sure.
Um, so for now, we utilize what tools we have with the information that we do have. And that's where I think this is really beneficial and can really be a game changer. So thank you so much for all you do and for being here and helping to answer questions and talk about this with us. And I'm excited to see, you know, what kind of positive change and you know, how this changes people's healing journeys in general, you know, speeding up this whole process, really just dialing in on what's important. And rather than just trying this or that detox and, you know, trying this or that program and not knowing, you know, if it's the right fit.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. It's great you put this together. We're happy to work on it.
Yeah. All right, ladies, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be in touch, and I hope you guys have a great week. All right. Take care.